Exposed. The surprising struggles of mortals in Greek myths that will transform your view on life. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor of her grandmother's attic, rain drumming against the roof like a relentless metronome. The smell of dust and old wood hung in the air, a testament to time long past. She rifled through boxes filled with memories of a family that once thrived, unearthed fragments of a life that seemed to echo Greek myth stories of heroes and trials. One book in particular caught her eye, its tattered cover and yellowed pages whispering secrets of gods and men. Each tale hinted at struggles she felt in her own life, mirroring the suffocating weight of expectations and the isolation of her profession. As a high school history teacher in Maplewood, Emma lived for the small victories. A student finally understanding a complex concept, a discussion igniting passion in young minds. Yet, overshadowing her humble achievements was the persistent brilliance of her brother Brian, a corporate attorney whose every success lit the family up with pride, while Emma often faded into the background. Was her dedication to education, to building character, truly meaningful in a world that seemed to worship wealth above all? She grappled with this question, toggling between inspiration and despair. Feeling the pressure weigh upon her chest, she recalled the tales from the book heroes who found their strength in loyalty and perseverance. With Maplewood facing financial ruin, businesses shuttering their doors like ghost towns, she felt the urgency rise within her. Could these themes from the myths be the antidote her town needed? Her mind raced through possibilities, the flicker of hope fighting against the disheartening reality. Could she channel the lessons of ancient wisdom to unite her comrades, to inspire them to rise against their fates? Before she could dive deeper into her reflections, a jarring thought struck her. Her brother. Brian's decisions as he navigated the corporate labyrinth felt like betrayals. He aimed to assist a large company ready to take advantage of their community's misfortune, a move she felt directly contradicted everything their grandmother once stood for. Anxiety bubbled within her as she envisioned a confrontation, a head-on collision of values that threatened the fragile bond they shared. Just then, her phone buzzed, pulling her out from spiraling thoughts. It was a reminder to prepare for the community meeting she had organized, a chance to rally the residents around the values of loyalty and integrity. Feeling the impending dread mix with fierce determination, she couldn't shake the looming confrontation with Brian. The image of his self-assured smile felt taunting now. What if he stood against her that night, dismissing her vision as naive? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she entered the dimly lit community hall, a wave of unease washed over her. Faces in the crowd turned toward her, each person holding on to silent hopes and fears. Emma could feel Brian's presence even before she saw him, a steady force that could either support her vision or push them all into despair. Heart racing, she began to speak, weaving together the wisdom of the myths, deliberately threading loyalty and integrity through her pleas. But as whispers slithered through the room, she sensed a shift. Brian stood up, eyes shimmering with both surprise and defensiveness, ready to counter her impassioned words. She hadn't anticipated this. The tension crackled like electricity, and her mind spiraled, caught between the fear of losing him and the desperation to protect their home. Would this confrontation seal their fates as enemies, or could they unearth buried truths that might heal their rift? Emma held her breath, waiting, as the next moment could shatter everything she believed. The room fell silent, the weight of expectancy palpable in the air. Emma's heart thudded in her chest louder than the relentless rain outside, each tick of time amplifying her anxiety. She watched as Brian's expression shifted, a mixture of confusion and defiance. This confrontation was not just about their differing views. It was a contest of values, a battle of what they believed was right for their community. Emma, this isn't how things work. You can't just spin tales from books and expect them to guide our decisions, Brian interjected, his voice smooth yet sharp, slicing through her fervent plea. Each word felt like a nail driven into the fragile hopes she had built. The familiar taste of bitterness filled her mouth. He was dismissing her passion as fanciful thinking, a trait she had always loathed in him. You don't understand, she replied, fighting back the queasiness threatening to rise. These stories tell us about perseverance, about standing for what's right, even when it's easier to look away. This town deserves better than what you're proposing. She wasn't just defending the community. She was defending herself, her identity as an educator, a nurturer of dreams in a world increasingly indifferent to them. Brian's posture relaxed into a defensive stance, arms crossing over his chest like a fortress. You think you can turn back time and magically restore this place? Reality isn't a fairy tale, Emma. It's about survival. You can't afford to let your emotions cloud your judgment. His eyes flashed with a blend of frustration and something else she struggled to pinpoint. Perhaps he was angry, maybe scared. This was more than an argument. This was a reckoning with the very core of who they were. With the desolate streets filled with echoes of dreams deferred, Emma knew they both stood at a precipice. She felt the urge to retreat, to abandon her conviction, but the resolve sparked within her, igniting a drive to persist. Brian, listen. You're right, life isn't a fairy tale. But it doesn't mean we have to abandon our humanity. We can't put profit over people. There's a way to help this community that doesn't involve exploiting it. Her voice steadied, piercing through the skepticism in the room. The murmurs around them grew, a ripple of unrest among the audience. It wasn't just her fight. It had become a shared uncertainty, a flickering awareness of their common struggle. Emma sensed this shift, and it stirred the embers of her ambition. Perhaps they could weave a new narrative together, a tale where greed didn't reign. We can reignite our spirit, create something worthy, something sustainable. I'm asking you to believe in this place, in these people as I do, she added, taking a step forward, bridging the emotional distance between her and Brian. Perhaps, if he could see the hope through her eyes, he would join her cause. Brian hesitated, the tension pulling taut between them, charged with all the unspoken words that had built up over years. Emma wondered whether he saw in her a reflection of everything he had left behind in his pursuit of success. The camera of the community's gaze now caught onto Brian's face. Waiting. I appreciate your passion, but... He began. The words hung hesitantly in the air, as if he were sorting through his thoughts, weighing the costs of dissent against the allure of compliance. The opportunity for a breakthrough loomed, teetering dangerously on a knife edge. Everything could change in this moment, and Emma felt it pulse through her veins, a mix of dread and anticipation. The truth was waiting to be unearthed, and with it, the potential for them to forge a new path forward or the risk of their relationship crumbling into irretrievable pieces. The decisive moment drew closer, a cliffhanger she could no longer ignore. Would they stand apart, or could they find common ground in their truths? She held her breath, her next words poised on the cusp of transformation, as if the tales she had long cherished were finally about to shape their reality. The silence felt like an ocean held back by a brittle dam, each second building pressure until it could no longer be contained. Emma's pulse quickened as Brian's lips pressed into a tight line, the storm of his thoughts evident in the furrow of his brow. She could almost hear the inner conflict raging within him, a struggle between loyalty to the past and the tantalizing whiff of something daring and new. The murmurs from the audience grew into a steady hum, tension coiling like a spring. Her heart sank momentarily under the weight of their expectations. She understood this was not just about her and Brian. It encompassed everyone in that room, the future of a town caught in the vice of uncertainty. Survival versus morality, the dichotomy played out in this moment like a tragic play. Imagine, she began, her voice cutting through the murmur, if we really invested in what matters to us. What if the stories we tell were not just fiction but blueprints for our reality? The words flowed more freely, emboldened by urgency. She gestured to the familiar faces of parents and teachers surrounded by dreams now hovering like dust motes in sunbeams, forgotten in the busyness of life. Brian remained silent, but the flicker in his eyes stirred something within Emma. Was it intrigue? Doubt? She couldn't decipher the nuance, but she sensed the atmosphere shift as if she had planted the seed of possibility. With each moment that passed, she could feel her resolve crystallizing. Was it really possible to build this narrative together? To create a bridge from resignation to resurrection? Brian. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hushed but firm tone. I know you love this community too. Don't you want to see it thrive in a way that honors its heart, instead of watching it bleed out, step by step? The intensity of her gaze bore into him, possessing a clarity that duality often obscured. His walls cracked ever so slightly, vulnerability exposing itself as he hesitated again. The battle danced plainly on his features, as if his identity as a successful businessman wrestled with the long-lost parts of himself as a child who believed in the power of change, of hope. The room felt electric, dozens of hearts beating as one, swaying in anticipation. Emma could almost taste the possibility on the tip of her tongue, while her determination solidified into an unyielding force. She had devoted her life to teaching resilience, to believing that transformation was within reach. Why should the town's fate be any different? Let us not let fear dictate the future, she implored, each word carved from her conviction. This isn't just about what's practical. It's about what's right. Brian's gaze shifted, swept away by the torrent of her passion and the prospect of stepping away from the norm. Should we risk our livelihoods on hope? He finally voiced, a half-whisper that felt like a crack in his facade. Her heart surged with the newfound power of their exchange. This was the moment of truth, an intersection of paths clashing. What's worse, Brian? Taking a risk in favor of meaningful change, or settling for a future that feels hollow? The question hung heavy in the air, laden with implications. Emma couldn't ignore the tremor within her, a tremor born of fear mingling with courage. This could very well fracture or fortify their connection. Her stomach knotted, but she pressed on, fueled by the stakes of her belief. In that moment, Brian appeared to soften, the rigidity in his shoulders easing. She met his eyes head-on, desperate to see beyond the uncertainty etched in his expression, searching for a flicker of agreement. But the flicker never fully ignited. Neurological pathways flashed between determination and hesitance, and as Brian opened his mouth to speak, the room held its breath. Suddenly, the vibe shifted again, this time laden with the potential for a decision that would alter everything they both believed. Emma clenched her fists in silent resolve, bracing for whatever came next, aware that this moment could very well redefine not just their relationship but their lives entirely. Would Brian finally acknowledge the necessity of change, or would he retreat into the safety of numbers and traditionality? As his words hung poised in the air, hope and dread swirled within her. Each breath a possibility, everything hinged on this second. The moment stretched unbearably as Brian hesitated, his internal battle evident in the sheen of sweat on his brow and the tightness of his jaw. Emma held her breath, every fiber of her being tuned to the slightest hint of movement or expression. His choice would reverberate beyond this room, a catalyst that might well unravel their past or sew up their future. Finally, he exhaled, a reluctant sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. What if we fail? He asked, his voice low but tinged with vulnerability. What if this change you're envisioning leads us into a deeper pit? The question pierced through Emma, and she could feel the vulnerability flooding back. She harbored fears of her own years of risk-taking in pursuit of ideals that scarcely ever panned out exactly how she had envisioned. What were all the late nights spent working, the dreams built and dismantled over and over, if not shadows of failure chasing her? We don't know unless we try, she answered, the conviction in her voice both newfound and familiar. This isn't just a shot in the dark, Brian. Look at the people here, at their faces. They deserve more than what we've settled for. He glanced at the audience, parsing fleeting expressions of hope and skepticism, and for a moment, Emma could see the gears shifting in his mind. Perhaps, she thought, she was finally chipping away at the armor, He wore the armor that once protected him but now only served to insulate him from the life he used to want. As she readied herself to confront the glaring reality Brian feared, a sudden self-awareness flooded through her. This wasn't merely about the town or even Brian. It was about confronting her own fears. She had preached the gospel of change for years but found herself wrestling with the specter of failure. What if her eloquence faltered? Brian. She tried again, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. What if we let our fears dictate our choices? Isn't it a greater risk to stand still, watching everything we know slip away? The air thickened with uncertainty. The energy shifted as people began to lean forward, eager to catch snippets of the exchange unfolding before them. Brian finally broke eye contact, brow furrowing as he contemplated her words. This wasn't merely a conversation, it was a reckoning. "I want to believe you," he said, his tone softer, almost pleading. But in that honesty, Emma sensed the stakes were higher than she had anticipated. What if her prolonged push for a vision birthed resentment if it was not fully embraced? Exhaling slowly, she refocused her thoughts. It was time to reveal more, to expose her own fears and fragilities, to foster understanding. "I won't pretend that I haven't stumbled or felt like the ground was pulling me down. I know the fear of failure, it creeps in and drives you away from what you crave. But feeling that fear means you're alive. It means there's something worth striving for." As his gaze locked onto hers, a flicker of understanding danced in his darkened eyes. She could nearly feel the tremors in his psyche, mirroring her own. Had he been so entrenched in his success that he had forgotten the very exhilaration of vulnerability? In that instant of realization, she felt lighter, almost liberated from the burdens she had carried alone. His brow relaxed, curiosity shaping the contours of his expression. "What if we tried together? I don't want to be part of a hollow future either." That was the moment. They stood on the precipice of recognition, poised to make a choice. Would they forge an alliance propelling them toward transformation? Or was this merely another false dawn in a cycle of discontent? Still, a shadow of doubt lurked behind his words. Emma sensed the fear of accountability, the weight of their intertwined fates. "We do it as a team," she reassured him, firm in her intent. "Let us challenge the narrative we've been fed. Show them that our community can rise greater than its oppression." The room buzzed with energy. Unfolding before them was a chance at rebirth, a path to regeneration cloaked not in certainty but in the promise of possibility. But just as hope twinkled like stars illuminating the night sky, a chilling thought rippled through her. What if this effort alienated them both from those they loved? What if their audacity sparked backlash? Emma's pulse quickened again as she grappled with the enormity of her own ambitions and the realization that every choice could carry steep consequences. As Brian opened his mouth, ready to affirm their new direction, the tension crackled. Would they embrace the risk? Or would doubt lead to a path less taken? As his lips parted, Emma held her breath, acutely aware that the shape of their futures teetered on a razor's edge. Brian's words hung in the air, suspended in a fragile silence that felt almost deafening. Emma could see the struggle painted across his features, a blend of hope and hesitation battling for dominance. Her heart raced, fueled by a mixture of fear and determination. She sensed that his choice could either ignite a spark within their efforts or snuff it out before it even had a chance to grow. "Let us do it," he finally said, the quiet defiance in his voice unlocking a door within Emma. A rush of warmth enveloped her, but with it came the weight of newfound responsibility. This was no longer just a mission to transform their surroundings. It was about confronting the intricate web of their shared destinies. As they left the small gathering, Emma felt invigorated yet anxious. The shadows of their past failures whispered to her, urging caution. What if their ambition crumbled under the weight of external pressures? The burden of expectation began to press against her chest as she replayed their conversation in her mind, how to turn lofty words into tangible actions. Back in her office, cluttered with memory-laden papers and remnants of half-baked ideas, Emma sank into her chair, rubbing her temples as the enormity of this undertaking washed over her. The vision she had glimpsed among the townspeople now demanded form, cohesion, and above all, credibility. She needed to convince them that change was possible, that creeping doubt could be replaced with collective ambition. The next day dawned with an urgency that prompted her to reach out to Brian. They needed a plan, an actionable agenda that would guide them forward. Sitting across from him in their favorite cafe, filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee, she began sketching ideas on the back of an old napkin, her heart racing with a mix of thrill and trepidation. "What if we frame this as a series of workshops?" she suggested, her excitement bridging the gap between anxiety and possibility. "Everyone has skills or dreams they haven't pursued. We can start there, weaving those threads of potential into something greater." She looked into Brian's eyes, seeking affirmation. He nodded, tracing absent patterns on the table. "I like that," he replied. "But what if they don't show up? What if we try and it flops?" His inherent caution wavered between support and doubt. Emma leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Then we learn. We adapt. But if we don't even try, we'll always wonder what could have been." Each word became a declaration of their path layered with purpose, revealing the person she had fought to become. As they fleshed out more ideas, it began to feel less like a mere project and more like a calling. They exchanged insights, unearthing shared dreams that revealed a depth of connection she hadn't anticipated. In that collaborative space, they carved out a foundation of trust, a sturdy wall against the fear of failure that once loomed so ominously. But with each passing moment, Emma felt the niggling presence of opposition, a hushed voice insisting that their ambitions could antagonize those who thrived on the status quo, who held the reins of comfort and complacency. The sting of past critics lingered in her mind. Days turned into weeks, and as Emma and Brian fine-tuned their pitch, the doubts remained. She couldn't shake the feeling that their efforts, while earnest, might ruffle feathers more than they anticipated. That Saturday evening, standing before an intimate circle of curious faces gathered in a local community center, Emma took a deep breath, poised on the brink of vulnerability. "We're here to embrace the future. I know that belief has been tested," she began, her voice steady. But inside, a storm brewed as all eyes turned expectantly toward her. With each word she spoke, the weight of responsibility expanded into a tidal wave of uncertainty. Would they embrace her plea for change, or would it ignite a wildfire of dissent? She felt Brian's steadiness beside her, but was it enough to insulate against the pushback they feared? As she concluded her speech and looked out over the crowd, the air vibrated with tension. An elderly man at the back shook his head, arms crossed defiantly. "What makes you think we can trust you?" he challenged, leveling his gaze at her like a challenge. Emma's heart raced. This was the moment. The confrontation she had both dreaded and anticipated had arrived. Could she summon the courage to confront not just his doubts, but her own as well? The thrill of potential gnawed at her, twisting her insides. Standing firm, she met his gaze, ready to respond, resolute in her intention to face not only his skepticism but also the ghost of her own fears writ large. With her heart pounding and the eyes of the crowd piercing her like arrows, Emma could feel the potent weight of the man's challenge hanging thick in the air. She had known this moment would come. However, the reality of it was far more visceral than the vision she had crafted in her mind. This was not merely about an idea. They were questioning her integrity, her very right to lead them forward. "You don't know me, sir. You don't know what I've fought for to be here," she began, channeling her emotions into the words. Each syllable emerged with the rawness of her experience, the failures, the scars. "I'm not asking for your trust blindly. I'm offering my commitment to earn it." His eyebrows nodded in skepticism, but she pressed on, infusing her voice with urgency. "What we're proposing isn't just a plan. It's a pathway to rediscover who we are. I believe we have the fortitude to evolve, but it requires courage from all of us. Not just from me, but from you too." Emma's realization that her past imperfections, her hesitation, her doubts were the very tools she could use to resonate with them. She wasn't presenting a flawless image. Instead, she embodied the struggle of every human being striving for authenticity. A flicker of surprise crossed the elderly man's face, momentarily softening his resolute stance. In that fleeting moment, Emma seized the opportunity. If I'm honest, I don't have all the answers. But together we can search for them. We can challenge the narrative that says we must accept things as they are. Change demands engagement, our engagement. She could feel Brian's steady presence beside her. A reminder that she wasn't alone in this fight. The silence stretched, almost a gaping wound in the room. Emma glanced around and saw shadows of doubt, but also the glimmer of intrigue. She noticed some heads nodding, others deep in thought. The stirring of a collective reckoning began to take shape. Every one of you holds a piece of this community, like threads in a fabric. We can either let it fray apart, or we can weave something beautiful together, she urged, feeling the stirrings of hope. Just then, a young woman in the front spoke up. What if we start with small changes? Little things that can lead to bigger shifts? Her voice was tentative, a beacon of vulnerability shining through. That's an incredible idea, Emma replied, her mind racing. Let us brainstorm those small changes together. What do they look like? As names of initiatives began to flow, Emma felt the atmosphere shift from one of resistance to inquiry. The elderly man, though still skeptical, considered the woman's proposal with a furrowed brow. For the first time, it appeared as if his resistance was loosening. After the discussion wound down and Emma left the gathering, her head spun with possibility. A sense of empowerment washed over her. She had faced the crowd not just as a speaker but as an equal. However, doubt still flickered in the corners of her mind. What if this energy didn't persist? What if voices of discontent gained strength? As she made her way home, Emma thought of potential challenges ahead, each seemingly larger than the last. Later that evening, seated in her dimly lit living room, she looked at the notebook filled with ideas that Brian and she had started. Could they follow through on this momentum? It became evident that this was about more than just initiatives. They were cultivating a culture, and she was the reluctant architect of it all. As she sat alone, she felt the pressure of this expectation building anew. This journey was no longer just about individual growth but also about accountability to others. Grasping her pen, Emma wrote one word at the top of the page. Trust. How fragile it was, yet how powerful. But there was a deeper question lurking in the shadows of her thoughts. What if, by taking this leap, she unraveled something within herself that she wasn't ready to face? The night deepened outside, mirroring the uncertainty inside her. The dawning realization whispered a pointed question: was her newfound purpose strong enough to withstand the tempests of disapproval, doubt, and internal strife that lay ahead? As she closed the notebook, Emma couldn't help but wonder whether she would rise to meet the forthcoming challenges or crumble beneath the weight of expectation. With a shiver of anxiety intertwining with anticipation, she felt the tumultuous tide of uncertainty drawing near, ready to launch her into yet another confrontation. The moment had come to examine not just the external, but the intimate battles brewing within her. The air hung thick with tension as dawn broke the following day, and Emma felt its weight anchoring her to a singular purpose. The gathering from the night before replayed in her mind like a reel stuck in a loop, its echoes both energizing and paralyzing. She paced her small living room, the decision to act pressing down on her as if the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. Emma grabbed her cell phone, trembling fingers poised to send a message to Brian. As her mind raced with thoughts, she stopped short. Would he see her ideas as grandiose or as achievable? Would he envision the same future she felt brewing? Questions flooded her thoughts, drowning out the voice of conviction that had once propelled her into this journey. The realization coursed through her. This wasn't just about her vision. It was about truly collaborating with others. Emma had to learn how to share her ideas, letting the fabric of her leadership grow tighter through the sturdy threads of mutual support. She couldn't just challenge others to engage. She had to embrace their voices too, confront the discomfort that came with sharing control, and invite dialogue even when it felt like surrender. After steeling herself, Emma shot a quick text. Can we meet today? I have some ideas I want to brainstorm. The response was immediate. Absolutely. Let us meet at noon. She felt a slight tremor of relief wash over her, followed by the gnawing anxiety about what those ideas would look like in their unfolding. As she prepared for their meeting, Emma sought clarity. She pulled out her notebook, flipping through the pages filled with thoughts that had been exploding since the gathering. But the words staring back at her seemed cryptic, muddled by her own fear. It was essential to distill the core of what she wanted to express. Eliminating distractions, Emma rewrote her notes, narrowing her focus to the fundamentals: connection, trust, and unity. Each word resonated differently with her. Trust was a shared commitment, not just a belief in her vision. Connection meant bridging gaps and acknowledging everyone else's contributions, while unity required unwavering support qualities she needed to embody and promote. The sun's rays seeped through the curtains as she held the new page up to the light. Was this authentic representation of her thoughts, or merely a facade to mask her insecurities? A few minutes later, she felt an unsettling breeze, hinting at something lurking beyond her neatly curated ideas. At noon, they met in a small cafe with fading sunlight casting a warm glow on their table. The chatter around them provided an odd form of comfort. As she shared her redefined vision for their initiatives, looking into Brian's eyes, those lingering threads of doubt began to unravel. She could see him processing, intrigued but hesitant. "Emma," he finally interjected, "I'm all for starting small, but are you ready to face the criticism that will undoubtedly come?" His question settled over her like a veil. It wasn't merely about the ideas. It was about her readiness to stake her personal integrity against the tide of judgment. Could she hold her ground? Moments from the previous day resonated in her memory, amplifying her fears. "I have to be," she mustered, reminding herself of the stakes involved, the lives intertwined in their plans. However, the faintest whisper of uncertainty still echoed in her mind. What if standing out put her in a spotlight she wasn't prepared for? Brian leaned in. "We should also think about how to mitigate dissenting voices as they arise. The dynamics of feedback are just as important as the ideas we're pushing. It's going to take more than enthusiasm to lead." His words struck a chord, and a thought began to form in her mind. Perhaps conflict could be reframed as a conduit for real dialogue, something that could challenge and strengthen their resolve. "Yes," she replied with renewed vigor. "Let us consider dissent not as something to fear, but as an invitation for deeper understanding." As the conversation evolved, the contours of their plan began to take shape, anchored by a shared commitment to confront the very doubts that weighed heavily over them. But just when the currents of her thoughts appeared to stabilize, a sudden realization gripped her. What if Brian's doubts mirrored her own unvoiced fears? What if this partnership began to reveal fractures she wasn't equipped to face? As they delved deeper into the discussions, Emma felt the sting of restriction against the growing surge of her aspirations. She realized the storm inside her was far from quelled. The time had come to face not just the outer challenges, but the inner conflict boiling beneath the surface. As they prepared to walk away from the cafe, Emma caught Brian's gaze, both of them uncertain about how the tension would transform into action. The palpable energy tingled in the air, hinting at possibilities yet unspoken. Would they be brave enough to unveil their vulnerabilities? The river of her thoughts turned turbulent, aware that the real battle awaited her, a confrontation not only with the world, but with the hidden barriers entrenched within her own psyche. The moment was arriving, where ideals would collide with reality, setting the stage for a revelation she had yet to comprehend. As they left the cafe, a subtle dissonance lingered between Emma and Brian. It became palpable, almost electric, wrapping around them like an invisible shroud. The outside world, populated by bustling pedestrians and roaring traffic, felt detached from the internal wrestle she was experiencing. Would their collaboration truly flourish, or would it remain stifled by shadowy fears? Emma resolved to address her growing concerns head-on, to confront the insecurities that loomed just beneath the surface. She needed to not only believe in the vision she was sharing, but to embody it fully, growing into a leader who could navigate the uncertain waters ahead. In the quiet of her car, Emma closed her eyes for a moment, envisioning the kind of leader she aspired to be. She could see herself with grounded confidence, welcoming dissent, steering through chaos with clarity. Yet a gnawing fear brushed against her aspirations. She couldn't ignore it any longer. The relentless voice whispering that she wasn't equipped for this crucial undertaking. Driving back home, Emma recalled the myriad voices that often filled her mind, flooding her with doubt. They wanted her to remain within the realm of the comfortable, to prevent any fracturing of their carefully curated identity. But she realized this wasn't about any single voice, it was about harmonizing many, creating a symphony rather than drowning in dissonance. Once home, she propelled herself to the desk, fighting against inertia. The warmth of her notes expanded into the moment, illuminating insights she'd glossed over in the haze of anxiety. She began to outline practical ways to encourage open dialogue within her team. She was determined to craft a space where every voice mattered, a collective strength born from vulnerability, a strategy instead of a mere suggestion. As she drafted an outline for their next meeting, Emma recognized the audacity required to lead with transparency. She found her fingers flying over the keys, transforming her angst into a framework that could guide not just her but everyone involved. It was liberating to visualize her role as a facilitator, rather than merely a commander tasked with dictating terms. A thought struck her. What if, in inviting dissent, she could actually spotlight untapped perspectives? The realization felt intoxicating, yet intimidating. She was gearing up for a challenge that demanded not just courage, but a readiness to open herself to scrutiny and uncertainty. Emma paused mid-type, confronted by the specter of vulnerability. What if her aspirations did falter? What if the flood of criticism she secretly feared drowned her leadership before it even began? She pushed the tormenting thoughts aside, making a conscious decision to focus instead on embracing authenticity as both a shield and a sword. The sun dipped low, casting elongated shadows across her walls, and with every minute, Emma felt the weight of the coming days. Each heartbeat echoed the challenging path ahead, reverberating with a commitment to move beyond her limits. But nestled within that commitment was a lurking fear that gnawed insistently. Was she truly prepared to open herself up to the complexities of her newfound vision? When her phone buzzed with a message from Brian, she hesitated before reading it. The constraints of her earlier insecurities flared momentarily, but she calmed herself and opened the message. Excited to hear more about your ideas. When's the next brainstorming session? A rush of adrenaline surged as she composed her response. There was opportunity, the chance to initiate the discussion she now believed in fully. Let's set it for Tuesday. I'll share a framework for us to develop collaboration, she typed. As she hit send, Emma felt a small shift within, a recognition that growth resided at the intersection of discomfort and ambition. The path would hardly be linear. It promised elevations and plunges, but she was ready to embark on that journey. But just as the flicker of resolve began to illuminate her spirit, another wave of unease crashed over her. What if Brian's enthusiasm turned to skepticism when push came to shove? She watched the shadows dance in the evening light, her thoughts spiraling into a tumult of what-ifs, each scenario more daunting than the last. The moment began to solidify into understanding. The true unraveling would come when she confronted those fears, not just Brian's, but her own. Emma understood then that the next meeting wouldn't just be a forum for brainstorming. It would draw her into the crucible of confrontation, where both her leadership and self-perception would be tested. Would she rise to meet the challenge, or would she retreat into the shadows of doubt? As the night enveloped her thoughts, she felt the ground shift beneath her, and the urgency of revelation pulsed through her being. The real transformation was imminent, and the moment of truth beckoned from the horizon. The days leading up to Tuesday unfolded with an agonizing crawl. Emma's mind churned relentlessly, oscillating between resolve and doubt as she prepped for the meeting with Brian. Each morning brought a new wave of self-questioning that tangled her thoughts like a frayed wire. Would her framework resonate with the team, or would it leave them more confused? As she arrived at the office, Emma could feel her heart race beneath the cool facade she wore. She walked into her workspace, took a deep breath, and positioned herself at the front of the conference room table. The space designed to encourage collaboration, yet feeling intimidatingly sparse. The room filled slowly, each member of her team entering with anticipatory glances that heightened her voltage of anxiety. Brian arrived last, a congenial smile on his face, but Emma sensed the flicker of expectation in his eyes. She couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was waiting to see if she would stumble under the weight of leadership. Despite her preparation, the scrutiny felt like chains around her chest, constricting the air she breathed. The moment had arrived, yet here she was, wearing the mask of confidence, while her insides trembled with uncertainty. She opened the meeting with a warm hello and shared the framework she had crafted. She articulated her vision for collaboration, hoping to create a culture where every voice could contribute. As her words spilled out, she was met with a mixture of nods and blank stares. The silence after she finished was deafening, creating a hollow space between her intentions and their reception. Suddenly, Brian raised his hand, drawing her attention like a spotlight. "This is great, Emma, but I'm a bit unclear about how we measure the success of this collaboration. What does it look like?" His question cut through her carefully constructed narrative, a piercing reminder of the interpretative gap she had overlooked. Emma felt exposed, her unsteady footing becoming apparent. Panic threatened to seep into her words. "Well, I think we can look at feedback loops and set specific goals," she started, but her voice wavered. Internally, she could feel the rising tide of inadequacy. Perhaps she wasn't ready to lead after all. Had she misjudged her abilities? The room buzzed with murmurs, the team dissecting her answer. Frustration and fear clawed at her resolve. But then, she remembered her commitment to vulnerability as a strength. "Can we brainstorm ways to define success together?" she proposed, daring to invite dissent, hoping it would lead to richer insights. With a flicker of courage, she felt a shift around the table. Ideas began to flow, the conversation morphing from her attack on self-doubt to an open exploration of what their collaborative efforts could achieve. As the discourse unfolded, she noted the energy transforming into something tangible, bold ideas percolating through the previously stagnant air. Yet, deep within, another doubt festered: would she culminate this burgeoning collective energy into actionable strategies? As the discussion blossomed, she feared that the real test was still ahead. Would they embrace her leadership even in the midst of uncertainty and potential missteps? Would Brian continue to support her when the tides of criticism surged? Emma leaned into the exchange, feeling their synergy, but she also acknowledged her fear of losing control over the narrative. The more she welcomed contributions, the more she could sense the ambiguity of her own authority ripple through the room. The intention she had so carefully curated began to evolve before her eyes, an organic relationship grounded in mutual input rather than one dictated by her authority alone. However, as the time ticked away, she realized that consensus wouldn't guarantee success. Navigating potential dissent would be her real challenge. The meeting wrapped up with tentative conclusions and a commitment to reroute efforts into a structured plan. When everyone departed, Emma remained, encased in the remnants of her doubt. The weight of leadership felt heavier than ever. She was not just a captain steering a ship, but rather a navigator discovering uncharted waters alongside her crew. As she stared at her notes afterwards, realization dawned: this was the space where transformation unfolded, yet not through predictable paths. With every discussion, her leadership was being redefined, balanced delicately between embracing uncertainty and adhering to her vision. But just as clarity seemed to shimmer on the horizon, another ominous thought loomed. What if the team's evolving perception of her leadership diverged from her own self-image? Where did that leave her? Her heart raced anew at the prospect of confusion eclipsing progress, standing at the threshold of self-discovery and potential rejection. Emma understood that the next step would not just be about strategy but about solidifying her own identity as a leader under fire. In the days ahead, she would find herself not only wrestling with external perceptions, but also grappling with her evolving narrative. She could feel it, the skepticism whispering at the edges of her ambitions, eager to challenge her every move. And Emma realized she was standing on the edge of a revelation, one that awaited her courage to pursue. What awaited her would define not only the trajectory of the project but the very essence of who she believed herself to be. Weeks had passed since Emma's pivotal meeting with her team. The structure of vulnerability she had forged gradually transformed into the blueprint of her leadership approach. Yet, it was only now, sitting in her office surrounded by project timelines and feedback forms, that she understood the true essence of her growth. She had conquered her fears not only through the support of her colleagues but by embracing the discomfort that accompanied transformation. Each day brought a mixture of optimism and anxiety, but she noticed a profound shift in her ability to navigate constructive criticism. In the beginning, facing doubts felt like facing an adversary. Now, it revealed itself as an ally. Emma had integrated feedback as a rhythm within her leadership style, weaving it into discourse that sprang forth a newfound creativity. Last week, during a community forum, Emma took a courageous step. She opened the floor to questions, a practice she initially feared would expose her vulnerabilities to the public. However, the shift in her mindset that she had nurtured gracefully bled into her actions. For every inquiry that collided with her previous insecurities, she welcomed with open arms each question, a stepping stone in her journey towards mutual understanding. In that moment, Emma understood the transformative power she had cultivated. This was no longer merely about leading. It was about guiding a community toward shared progress and acknowledgement of their collective voice. With each discussion, she not only engaged her colleagues. She continuously propelled herself toward an elevated self-perception. Even Brian had begun to recognize this change. During yesterday's meeting, he leaned forward, his demeanor signaling something deeper. "Emma," he said with an earnest tone, "I see how you've evolved. You're not just bringing us ideas. You're bringing us together." His words, a clear validation, wrapped around her heart like an embrace. Days after that statement, Emma sat surrounded by papers bearing the marks of their achievements, the new youth programs launched, workshops spurring inspiration, and feedback reports bursting with enthusiasm. She recalled the relentless self-doubt that had threatened to stifle her creativity. Now, she stared at the abyss of uncertainty and realized it had transformed into a vast landscape of potential. The shadows that had plagued her thoughts but a few months ago now served as an illumination of the imperfections she had come to embrace. She wasn't just an educator anymore. She was a changemaker, and the townspeople were responding. It dawned on her that the accomplishments were no longer measured merely through numbers or direct feedback. They lay in the resonance of voices uplifted. The rejuvenated pride reflected in the faces of her students, their parents, and her colleagues revealed her newfound dedication to nurture a future rooted in shared dreams. As she charted the next steps to deepen their initiatives, Emma felt a swelling sense of worth. She had gained recognition not just for her efforts but as an influential leader. Participation soared in their community activities, igniting hope where despair once festered. The resonance of personal growth emerged again when she reflected on how deeply connected and involved she had become. Emma envisioned the degrees of effort that coalesced to create a sanctuary where trust and support were the foundation rather than merely topping remarks. These values, part of her legacy, had altered the very fabric of their community. On a quiet Friday afternoon, Emma paced the same attic where her journey began. The old book lay open, its stories echoing all that had unfolded, a reminder that every hero faced ultimate resistance. The myths had captured a truth she now lived. Transformation relied not solely on individual efforts but on authenticity embedded in connection. With a newfound solid confidence, she felt acknowledged competence ripple through her being. Emma had successfully ushered change, fostered collaboration, and emerged as a leader characterized by resilience and purpose. She knew she would continue to face challenges, but now they felt like opportunities to affirm her commitment to growth. As her reflection took hold, the moment of gratitude swelled within her, no longer obscure or hesitant, but as radiant as the threads that bound people together. Emma smiled warmly at the light filtering through the windows, envisioning future endeavors and the pathways still to be paved alongside her team. It was then that she resolved to embrace each challenge ahead with unflinching determination. Emma had earned this transformation, and it was far more than a chapter in her life. It was an invitation to forever evolve, to continually create impact, and to faithfully lead with conviction. Reflecting on her journey, she recognized a lesson profound. Every struggle had not only been a trial to endure but a chance to emerge stronger, more aware, and prepared to fuel a legacy of change in her community for years to come. Now, it is your turn to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, because it truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending considering Emma's transformation and growth. And remember, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support, and don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.